Okay, I'm going to close Slack so that I don't get distracted, so I can give all my attention to you, the viewer. So, I've decided to skip the intro that I was about to give. Not really. I really love this this kind of like radio station, bourgeoisie, Joe Rogan. That was a tricky one. Haven't had my coffee. Okay, so basically where we got to, I've decided I'm not going to stream every day because that is insane. It's something crazy people do. I don't. I found that it's kind of a different flow to actually doing the work, and if I'm always sort of in this like presenter talkback radio host shtick, it's fine, but I'm not actually achieving my main goal, which is to like hit flow. So I'm just going to do it towards the end of the week, which means I can share what I've worked on. That being said, I didn't really get the chance to do much work this week because I didn't have the pressure of doing a stream and things like that. So we'll feel it out. I had a really fun stream on the weekend with my friend. He came on and we did sort of like a radio talkback host shtick, like breakfast morning, Sando and Gouds. It's pretty funny. So where we're up to is finishing off the tutorial series by Dirk at Work. Which has been awesome. It's been so great to get like an insight into, especially substance pain. I'm already pretty familiar with, I'm super familiar with tools like Gravity Sketch, but it was great to see his workflow and how it worked. I also am relatively familiar with UV unwrapping. In fact, I'll do a little like, we'll just dive into it. It's pretty dull. But even the main content of the show is quite dull, so adding a recap of previous work. Look, I think it's cool. I don't know. I think that I'm this close to quitting. Well, I won't quit my job. That's a joke. But starting a TV station. Mainly because I'm obsessed with OBS as a tool. I think that the more people that know about it, you can basically turn your house into a TV studio. Essentially, it's cool. So I'm going to. Yeah, I'm pretty familiar with Blender and UV unwrapping. It was really good to see how someone that's quite good with those tools, like the decisions they make and stuff like that. But now we're in Substance Painter, which the sort of like jump from how UVs work to how you can then use that information to then how you can edit it is like a game changer for me. I didn't know any of that stuff. So I'm going to continue with that and have a set of, have completed Dirk's whole flow, which is really cool. I'm going to try and chop through that pretty quickly because I was going to do it during the week, not on stream, and now here we are, so whatever. Dirk at Work, search on Twitter, incredible style, aesthetic, I think really defining a new sort of art form, really. Like he's really like found a cool way to use the tools. Once that's all done, I'm going to attempt some of my own geometry and see what the output is. And then I have a call with the creative director from work. So this isn't work stuff. This is just me. I'm more of a developer, designer. I'm not a 3D artist, but we're doing feedback sessions on my professional development, I guess you could call this. I've tried to convince him to come on as a sort of like America's Next Top Model judge style thing. So we'll see what happens there. So with no further ado, let's spill that tea. See that camera fade? Forget about it. Hang on, let's make this a little smaller. Let's make it half the size. So one thing I've realized, I don't know if realized is the right word, is that like muttering is easier emotionally and physically, but it's not good TV, so I'm going to try not to mutter. And with a continuation of the no further ado, let's have no further ado. Take me on a journey.
To make my scene and scale them and use them upside down, so I don't really want them to have a very specific direction.
I also feel comfortable streaming now because
what I could do is give some more interesting texture to these rocks.
I've kind of learned
just to see what that looks like.
And
yeah, what I'm gonna do is create a new layer. Give it a color that's very visible. I'll change that
we're
later
towards the end
on.
of the tutorial, so I kind of
And
I'm pretty good.
what I'm gonna do now is add let's see what I'm going to do. I'm going to yes, I'm gonna add a black mask like I just did. Then to that black mask I add a fill layer. Oops. Then select that fill layer, and then here you can select a texture which gets applied as that fill layer. Now I've created a texture earlier on, which is this one.
Cool.
I don't know if I can make it bigger. This is basically
Sick.
a texture that has bigger and smaller dots, and it tiles. So let me just add that to that mask. Now it's very big because its basic size is the same size as the UV map. So I want this to tile. So I scroll up here, and the scale is 1, so it now has the same scale as the UV map. If I scale it up, you can see these dots getting smaller. Now here's the problem
cool.
that I think I mentioned earlier. Now these texture seams are becoming very visible because this is a tiling texture. It's not going to tile properly over these lines.
Put my
So
oh yeah. See, I didn't know how
let me
these
just
cuts worked. It just seemed like this kind of
set it to a setting where I think
just magic.
it's not too big and not too
And
small.
now I definitely I get it. Oh yeah, let's just use this one. So he's just adjusting the size.
And what we can do now is fix this by hand. This is not an ideal solution for this, and probably you would want to just paint these circles just by using a brush, which would be more practical now, but it's a good way to show it. I'll do that later on with these mushrooms. For now, let's check out this little workflow.
Oh man.
Okay, now you got to understand that the mask part is the red part. So
The mask is the red.
if we,
Yeah.
what I actually want to do is invert this mask.
Oh.
So I just right click it and go invert mask. And now I've just masked out the dots. Now I want to get rid of these parts that are not,
Get the chat open.
that are kind of overlapping
Give me
the,
that. Oh yeah.
the
in the
UV
chat.
seams. I don't like them, and I can do with fewer dots. That's fine.
Chat. How do I get to my chat?
So it's kind of a quick fix for something like this.
Oh yeah.
The way that I do it is kind of similar to the way that I would do it in Unity, or in Photoshop, I mean. Just actually group this layer by itself. The only benefit is that I can just add another mask to it. So in this case, I'm not gonna add a black mask because I want to actually paint out some circles. I don't want to add them, and if I add a black mask, I can't see anything anymore. So I'll add a white mask in this case, so nothing seems to change. Now I can just actually use this brush tool.
Sorry, I wasn't listening. I decided to set up my chat.
Get rid of these parts, and probably you would want to just paint these circles just by using a brush, which would be more practical now, but it's a good way to show it. I'll do that later on with these mushrooms. For now, let's check out this little workflow. Okay, now you got to understand that the mask part is the red part. So if we, what I actually want to do is invert this mask. So I just right click it and go invert mask. And now I've just masked out the dots.
Ah, okay.
Now I want to get rid of these parts that are not, that are kind of overlapping the UV seams. I don't like them, and I can do with fewer dots, that's fine. So it's kind of a quick fix for something like this.
I'm having a mind
The way that I do it is kind of similar to the way that I would do it in Unity, or in Photoshop, I mean. Just actually group this layer by itself. The only benefit is that I can just add another mask to it. So in this case, I'm not gonna add a black mask because I want to actually paint out some circles. I don't want to add them, and if I add a black mask, I can't see anything anymore. So I'll add a white mask in this case, so nothing seems to change. Now I can just actually use this brush tool, and maybe I'll go to brushes and select the basic hard brush.
A white mask is unmasked.
So what I've done, just to recap quickly, here's a layer, a red layer, that I've added a black mask to it. To that black mask, I've added fill, which allows me to select a texture, which effectively becomes the mask. And then I've inverted that mask, so now the red dots are actually the mask, if that makes sense. Then I've grouped that layer, so to that group I can add another mask. And I've made it a white mask, so I can just delete things from I delete some of these red dots. Okay, so now I've selected the brush here, selected the hard brush,
I guess I can just do this.
and
Maybe I just need to make the edge sharper.
I'll make it a little smaller. You do this with your brackets, the same way you do it in Photoshop.
What else we got?
And as you select the mask, you scroll down here, and there's all these settings for the brush. A lot of them are very similar to how Photoshop does it. You go here to the bottom, there's this grayscale. If it's white, I'm adding. If it's black, I'm subtracting, as regular masks work. So I make it black. Now I'm painting with black, and now I can just delete the dots that are bothering me. Now, as I mentioned, these UVs, I've done them very simple for these rocks, so there's definitely some ugly stretching going on. You could fix them.
I'm so keen to jump into
or not.
My geometry. I've already made some geometry that I want to do this to.
For now, this is really just to show you kind of how I would do it. So you can use these tools and create your own stuff.
What happens if I... No, nothing. Okay. So I don't really care how this looks, but I am a perfectionist, so... Well, am I a perfectionist? I'm a completionist.
Go in there. Also, don't really like that one or that one.
This is working better for what Dirk's doing because he is using like discrete. The mask is like revealing.
Let's leave it for now. Let's do this other one.
Whereas I'm trying to make this pattern repeat, which I don't think this is the. You probably wouldn't do this. I'm guessing, unless you're a maniac on the floor. Got someone coming in from Twitch, probably Jesse. Hey Jesse. All right. It's pretty cool though, like to understand how, like I was always so baffled by what UVs did. and how like how artists even dealt with them, and B, now I'm starting to get like how.
And I haven't mentioned this.
Use them to
probably good to follow some basic
They're
Substance Painter tutorials in terms of navigating software, but your alt-click middle mouse button allows you to move around the pan, and left mouse click and alt allows you to rotate. You probably already know this. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is kind of a nonsensical way to do something like this, especially a pattern like these dots. But this is all in the spirit of education. So let me show you how I would do it differently with these little mushrooms. Okay, again, I'm gonna group these two layers, black mask, polygon fill, and here make this color white, so you're adding to the mask. So this will be the layer for these rocks. I'll do these mushrooms first. Select a material. Are we gonna do the classical mushrooms? No. Let's make them red first. And let's just add some simple dots to them.
Look at that shit. That looks so cool. I'm screenshotting that.
So that second layer is going to be the color of the dots. I'm going to add a black mask to it. And then I'm just going to take my brush, select the basic hard brush, make it a little smaller, and just...
Alright, hang on, I wasn't watching. Okay, I just don't want to let this go. So I guess, okay, yeah, this needs its own layer for the rocks as well. Cool, I get it. So the black mask lets you basically mask everything out, and then you highlight the polygons to say, hey, anything, well, basically paint at UV points things white, and then that's what cuts through the black masking. So I've made a layer of color, and then I've applied a black mask to it. It's pretty cool. Definitely watch this tutorial. I was so close to done, and then I can do mine. I really want to take this and then do like a sort of New York loft. This is a very particular thing that I want to achieve, basically. Okay.
Start clicking away.
Fill. Let's make it red.
Some variance in size. You can see we're getting into the smaller objects, so resolution is getting a little lower, but I think it's still fine.
Is this a color?
It's going to be pretty small objects in the scene. We're working, the default document resolution was 2K, as we saw in the very beginning. You can check that out. Here on the texture settings, you see the size is 2K. You could always make it higher, but I think it's a good size for textures in Unity.
Straight up circle.
Okay, so now I've just added some dots, and now it doesn't really have any problems with where your UV's light map, or I mean UV seams are, because it's actually just looking at the 3D space And before, with these rocks, we were using a tiling texture. And then, of course, the tiling is not going to overlap perfectly. But now we're just painting it in the 3D space. And we don't have those problems. What I could do with this, what would be nice, is to add a little height to these dots. So that's just adding the height channel and increasing it a little bit. Getting sticking out nicely. Move the light around to see what we want to do with the glossiness.
So wait, how do we do that? Height channel. This is like magic.
And
Don't need that.
I think it would be fun to have these dots be pretty glossy, and then actually the red below it. We'll add a roughness channel to that as well. Have it more rough. So I just feel like it's kind of a different material. Now we're gonna have these stems be a different material or a different color. Just add another fill layer.
Look at that. That's all the texture.
I don't know, white for now.
Fuck me.
Black mask.
Oh.
And let's just do a polygon fill.
Alright, hang on. I think I'm going rat mode. Let me catch up. Fuck me. That's crazy. I wonder if A, you can rotate your brush, and B, if you can I wonder if you can randomize the size? No. Yeah, you can rotate it. I'm not gonna go to rat mode on this. Well, I am, but it is fucking freezing, by the way. I don't know if anyone else lives in the world, but God, look at these scary mushrooms. Alright, screen capping that. Print screen, paint. You gotta screen cap your little hokey pokey weird things that happen along the way, because it's kind of like writing an idea down. Like, you'll never remember it otherwise. What? Okay. And then he made the bottom layer rough, and the top layer here we go. Bottom layer rough, top layer. Right. Let's make it so shiny. Wait, no. Look at these pulsating tendrils. That's hectic. Alright. So we're doing another layer where we do the stems. I like that. And my mind is blank. I literally have no mind anymore. It has been exploded out of my brain by Dirk. What substance paint on Dirk? I don't want to give you too much weird shout out to the point where you think I'm creepy. But you're my god. This is so cool because you can basically create all these hyper complex layers, layer information, I guess, and then this all gets baked into one set of channels, I think, like color and It's just incredible. I dang it. Just keep going. All praise Dirk. Dirk at work. So for anyone following along, watching tutorials from Dirk at work, who is an incredible VR artist. How does he stop
And
it
I'm
from
not going to
going
select it
through?
all the way to the top because these are very small objects. We can now really see the resolution going down.
Okay.
So I'm just going to add a little blur to that mask
It, like,
to fix
shoots
that edge.
through. There must be a way
Although
to stop that from
you
happening.
really have to try hard to be able to see that in the scene once we've used this. I'll put these objects in the Unity scene.
That's cool. UV chunk fill.
But let's add a filter to that mask, blur filter, and now the basic setting is already good. Now see here, we've accidentally selected another face. Let me disable this blur here. Going to the mask,
Unfreeze.
going to the polygon fill, which is still selected. Make sure you go to black, and then you get rid of that.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay, let's reapply that blur.
I was thinking about you, Dirk.
And
Filter below.
so do we want it to be white? Or do we want it to be a little bit more of an exotic color?
What have I done?
I actually think I don't want the red. I want a kind of a lime green color. This kind of in between green and blue. And then change these dots to white, I think, maybe yellow. Light yellow. Yeah, something like that. Looks like a little less traditional mushroom.
That's weird. There's a way that you can set the direction of the blur. Alright, we're gonna have to go back.
Is already good. Now see here, we've accidentally selected another face. Let me select it all the way to the top because these are very small objects. We can now really see the resolution going. Mask, blur filter, and now the basic setting is already good. Now see here, we've accidentally selected another face. Let me disable this blur here. Going to the mask, going to the polygon fill, which is still selected. Make sure you go to black, and then you get rid of that. Okay, let's reapply that blur. And so do we want it to be white? Or do we want it to be a little bit more of an exotic color? I actually think I don't want the red. I want a kind of a lime green color. This kind of in between green and blue. and then change these dots
maybe because I use that UV
to
paint
white. I think
situation.
maybe yellow. Light yellow.
Let's turn you off.
Yeah, something like that. Looks like a little less traditional. Mushrooms. Select those 3 layers. Group them.
Probably because it was like straight up like sharp
at
line.
the black mask. Polygon fill, mesh fill.
Let's assume it's that.
Select them both.
Wait, what did Durkee just do?
And there you go. So now let's rename this folder to mushrooms.
It's so cold.
Now let's do this ground cover, and I think we can use the UV random color generator nicely with this one. So add a fill layer, make it completely black, add a black mask to it. In that black mask, right click add generator, and then in the generator I select the UV random color. Now you can always select that seed to see if there's something that you like better. But it's usually a little hard to stop at a moment that you're happy, so just leave it like this. I'm going to use this layer, as I did before, as an overlay layer to change the color of a fill layer beneath it. So add a fill layer, just color, and yeah, maybe this ground cover material will actually just be green.
Blood mushrooms.
I need it underneath this layer, so just move it around.
The children's
like so.
snack.
And let's see what blend mode works nicely. As I said, multiply will make white transparent, black not. Screen is the opposite. Will make black transparent and white not. But I think the overlay works nice, which makes 50% gray transparent and the darker parts darker and the lighter parts lighter. Now to compensate for that loss of saturation, we can make the layer itself a little bit more saturated. Works nice, which makes 50% gray transparent and the darker parts darker and the lighter parts lighter.
Alright, gonna have to go back.
It's usually
Sorry,
a little hard to select them both. And there you go. So now let's rename this folder to mushrooms.
So there's legitimately an Arctic wind.
Now let's do this ground cover, and I think we can use the UV random color generator nicely with this one. So add a fill layer, make it completely black, add a black mask to it. In that black mask, right click add generator, and then in the generator I select the UV random color.
Okay, so make this completely black so we're not setting the color here.
Oh, Jesus, it's cold.
Yeah, it's cold and spooky.
Now let's do this ground cover, and I think we can use the UV random color generator nicely with this one. So add a fill layer, make it completely black,
Fill layer, black.
add a black mask to
Add
it.
a black mask.
In that black mask, right click add generator, And then in the generator, I select the UV random color.
UV random color.
Now you can always select that seed to see if there's
So what's it doing?
something that you like better. But it's usually a little hard to stop at a moment that you're happy, so just leave it like this.
So what's
I'm going to use this layer, as I did before, as an overlay layer to change the color of a fill layer beneath it. So add a fill layer, just color, and yeah, maybe this ground cover material will actually just be green. I need it underneath this layer, so just move it around like so. And let's see what blend mode works nicely. As I said, multiply will make white transparent, black not. Screen is the opposite. Will make black transparent and white not. But I think the overlay works nice, which makes 50% gray transparent and the darker parts darker and the lighter. Now to compensate for that loss of saturation, we can make the layer itself a little bit more saturated, like so. Let's see what happens if we duplicate this layer. Yeah, it's actually gonna enhance the contrast because it's gonna be an overlay over an overlay. Just as a quick little way to change that effect. Let me put that saturation up a bit more. Now, the only problem we might run into is that now we have this color variance. We still want to be able to duplicate this little patch many times and not see the repetition. So it's very important that we scale and rotate and don't just copy it. The good thing about Substance Painter is once you've got that path you're going to export your textures to in place, it's very easy just to go back and make some changes, export them straight to Unity, and your file will be updated. So for now, I think this is fine. Let me group these layers. And give them a mask just for the ground cover. And give it a name. Now I think I want to undo these rocks because it's kind of a nonsensical way to do it. At least you see how you could do something like that. But I think I'm just going to delete this whole layer. Add a different layer. Let's make it the same red for now. Add a black layer, a black mask I mean. And maybe this is a good opportunity to play around with some of the brushes that come with Substance Painter. So again, pretty similar to Photoshop, and actually you can use actual Photoshop brushes within Substance Painter, which is nice. There's this one called Dots, and it basically does kind of what you would expect it to. You can paint over it. And it creates dots of random sizes. Let me pull this up a little bit. Select that mask and then you can
the mask.
get to the the brush settings, the alpha
okay.
settings. There's also a stencil. I'm not going to go into that now. The grayscale is basically the color you're using, because you're not painting the actual color, you're painting the mask.
That's cool.
So if you go into the brush,
Cool.
there's all these settings you can do, and you see a nice little preview there. You can change the spacing. There's the size jitter, pretty similar to brush settings in Photoshop. Flow jitter, which basically just means more and less transparent. Let me put that down a little bit. Angle jitter, well, you won't see that now because these are round shapes, or mostly round. Again, if I want to undo this, I'll just add a black mask to it and overrides it. Yeah, so that's
Such
not
an
that
incredible
different from
tool
what I
set.
had, but just to kind of show you how you could access those brush settings. Let me just quickly paint some dots on this. And again, because I'm painting on it directly now, we don't have that issue with the UV scenes. Because before we were using a tiling texture. And now we're just painting directly onto the model. Okay, maybe something like this. And now we can go in and easily add some height to it, or maybe whoops, I don't know what happened there. Can't see to, yeah. Yeah, you can easily add height. You can also maybe do the opposite. Maybe that's create little holes. Maybe that's nice for this one. And again, control the roughness.
This is mind-blowing.
Oops. Make them more or less rough.
And then I guess I could like change.
Yeah, I don't think I want to overcomplicate it at this stage. Something like this. Now just for these two final objects.
I could add a mask in there
And again,
for.
if you just create the substance file with all the colors, make sure to save the substance file, and you can very easily go back in and change the materials later on. Once that link with Unity is established, it's very easy to override the textures.
So I'm gonna add a fill layer to a random color generator. Just copying what we did with the mushrooms. Add generator UV.
Yeah, let's create a little different color on the nipple, as I keep calling it. And for that, I would use the polygon fill.
Is it around this way? No. Copy this mask. Can I add another black mask to it? Paste.
resolution is getting very low here. Very tiny, tiny polygons we're filling up.
Okay, alright, so copy into mask.
So we definitely want to use some blur
Group layers.
to get rid of that border.
Add black mask. How do I copy this mask? Copy mask.
Something like this.
Mask.
Right click on the mask, add a filter,
Doesn't really do what I
blur, and make it a little smaller than the default setting. Something like this. And maybe it's nice if we actually give this a little bit of a metallic
so,
feel.
Yeah, this like changes.
So add the metal
color.
channel.
Shit, I wasn't listening.
And yeah, make it a golden nipple. Why not? Play around with the roughness.
I pretty much get the idea. Just keep plugging it through.
And I want to do the same. Play around with the roughness for these parts as well. Yeah, make those leaves pretty glossy. Sure, why not?
Cool.
Group them. Flower. And then
Layer.
the final one, before we're gonna export it and bring it into Unity. For this, I'm just gonna do the same as I did with the flower. Oops. Make sure you have the polygon selected. And let me add those two.
Okay. This is also like forcing me to practice, which is really good.
Again, add a little blur. Now maybe for this, we just need a subtle gradient, I think. Again, black mask,
Yeah, we get the idea.
add a generator, and select the 3D linear gradient. Up the contrast and play with the balance to see where it is. We've got a very small object here, so it's gonna move quite a bit. So do we want this, or do we want the inverted? Let's put it beneath that red layer so we can still see that red dot. Yeah, white, and then make it just very subtle. So something like that. Now, don't forget to group these layers and give it its own mask. Call it flower 2. Okay, now we've done some basic materials for the assets.
Basic.
It's always good to make sure that you have a good name here. Flora, let me just name this Flora Tutorial Assets. This will automatically get the name of the imported 3D mesh. Now there are lots of other cool tricks you can do in Substance Painter, but I just went over some basic things you can do for this workflow. So I think now it's time to export these textures. Gonna go to File, Export Textures. And as we had already set in the beginning, the configuration was set to Unity 5, Standard Metallic. This is the workflow that I am currently using. There are a lot of other options for exporting, but we'll be using Unity. This is the location of your textures. What I like to do is immediately set this to the location of the Unity project you're working on. Now mine's got a kind of an obscure name. I'll change that later on. Let me just create a folder here called textures.
He puts it in the Unity project.
Select that.
That's cool.
And now I am exporting directly into Unity. And I want to do that because once this path is set and I open up Unity and I don't like certain colors, I just go back into Substance Painter, change some things, re-export, and these textures get overwritten.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And that's a nice little workflow. There's a Substance Painter plugin also for Unity. There are more advanced ways of doing this, but this is for now my workflow. So as we can see here, we're gonna export 4 textures. It's gonna be albedo, transparency.
Alright, I gotta watch this, so let me just finish this fucking thing. Do that too, and let's just give you a black mask to be tidy. Do not want to waste any. Oh yeah, it looks pretty sick. Oh my god, Dirk, you're a genius. And then we group these. I love learning new stuff. It's been a godsend in obviously dealing with all the stuff that's going on. Is having I read a good tweet about just like try and learn a little bit every day as a way of like dealing with stress, basically. What's this called? Weird thing. And it's kind of good. This is definitely isn't my like aesthetic in terms of like the objects, and so this has actually been good because I feel like if I had done this on some weird sci-fi thing, I would have gotten weird and obsessive and not finished the tutorial. Story of my life. All right. What are we doing here? Look at that. Oh man, that makes me so happy. I guess I better start a Unity project to put this in. I'm not doing this, Boulder. I can get fucked. Well, this is pretty cool. So this is what I've been working on. I made this all in Unity with shaders, essentially. And that's why I was like, oh, I need to learn more about textures, because I was just like, sticking any old texture on. Oh man, I'm so excited to do the work on these bad boys. Oh, my fingers are so cold. I'm gonna have to have a coffee and have a break.
There's no transparency in this, but there's a channel in that map for transparency. The metallic smoothness, the normal map, and the emission, which we added later on. It's gonna export 2K textures.
Okay, what am I doing? Substance Painter. So close.
Which is fine. Yeah, Substance Painter plugin also for Unity. There are more advanced ways of doing this, but this is for now my workflow. So as we can see here, we're gonna export 4 textures. It's gonna be albedo, transparency. And there's no transparency in this, but there's a channel in that map for transparency. The metallic smoothness, the normal map, and the emission, which we added later on. It's gonna export 2K textures.
So it's switched to an entity-based folder structure.
Just hit export.
So each bundle of work gets its own folder that has textures, art, and things like that in it.
And it's going to create those textures.
It makes
Make sure to save the
4
file.
textures. That's nuts.
Or 2K textures.
Let's go back a bit. Sorry.
And let me just create a folder here called textures. Select that. And now I am exporting directly into Unity. And I want to do that because once this path is set and I open up Unity and I don't like certain colors, I just go back into Substance Painter, change some things, re-export, and these textures get overwritten. And that's a nice little workflow. There's a Substance Painter plugin also for Unity. There are more advanced ways of doing this. But this is for now my workflow. So as we can see here, we're gonna export 4 textures. It's gonna be albedo, transparency. There's no transparency in this, but there's a channel in that map for transparency. The metallic smoothness, the normal map, and the emission, which we added later on. It's gonna export 2K textures, which is fine. So just hit export.
My menu looks different. Maybe I've got a different subscription or something.
And it's going to create those textures. Make sure to save the file. And let me, and now you can see the complete mess my computer is. Flora tutorial. And now it's time to open up the assets in the Unity scene that I already have, where I'm going to add these assets to. And I'm going to show you how we're going to
one thing we're going to do is download Dirk's experience.
Get as much mileage out of these assets as I can.
Sure, alright. Have some money, Dirk.
So we've exported our 3D model from Gravity Sketch, which gave us a zip file. We unzip that folder, and then we import the OBJ in your 3D modeling software. For me, it's 3D Max, and I'm gonna show you, do a quick run through of how I prepare the models before.
Right. You can watch me being a hero and supporting a okay, logging in. I've got a twit. I've got an itch. Hang on. .com. Won't put in my password. I won't say my password out loud while I'm talking, obviously. Okay, absolute hero. Hey, what a legend. Alright, so yeah, I'm downloading it so we can explore the garden later. Alright, I'm gonna take a little break, have a little rest. I've got a rest view, right? Tutorial view, stream view, camera only. Scene 2. Duplicate, okay, break view, add, announcement,